The double doors of the emergency room burst open at 2:17 in the morning. I was finishing charting when I heard the commotion. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, and on it was a man in his early 40s, convulsing violently. His wife ran alongside them, screaming that something was wrong, that he had collapsed at home without warning. I immediately noticed the tattoo on his forearm as we transferred him to the bed. It was a military unit insignia, Iraq, 2007. This man was a veteran. Dr. Harrison took over. He was one of our senior physicians, confident, always in control. But that night, something was different. He barked orders quickly, almost too quickly. I prepared the medications he requested, but when I handed him the vial, I noticed his hand shaking slightly. He drew up the dose and administered it through the IV line. Within seconds, the patient's convulsions worsened. His blood pressure dropped dangerously. I looked at the empty vial still in my hand, and my heart stopped. It was the wrong medication. Completely wrong. I glanced at Dr. Harrison. His face had gone pale, but he continued working as if nothing had happened. He ordered more interventions, more medications to counteract what was happening. The team worked frantically for 20 minutes until the patient finally stabilized. But the damage was done. I could see it in the monitor readings, in the way his body responded. Something had gone terribly wrong inside him. After we moved the patient to the intensive care unit, I stood in the hallway, my hands still trembling. I needed to document everything in the chart. It was standard procedure, but before I could return to the nurse's station, I was intercepted by Mr. Douglas, our medical director. He asked me to step into his office. The door closed behind us, and he sat down, gesturing for me to do the same. His voice was calm, almost fatherly, as he explained that the situation with the veteran had been extremely complicated. He said that Dr. Harrison had done everything possible under difficult circumstances. Then he looked directly into my eyes and said that it would be better for everyone, especially for the patient's family, if we kept the documentation simple and straightforward. No unnecessary details, no speculation about what might have caused the complications. I left that office feeling like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. My name is Olivia Carter, and I have been a nurse for 12 years. I moved from a small town in Ohio to Chicago to work at one of the most prestigious hospitals in the region. I built my career on integrity, on always putting patients first. But that night, sitting in my car in the parking lot as the sun began to rise, I realized I was being asked to do something I had never done before. I was being asked to hide the truth. If this story has already gripped you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next will surprise you even more. And comment below where you are watching from. I want to know where you all are. I went home that morning and tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the veteran's face, the way his body had seized up after that injection. I kept replaying the moment I handed Dr. Harrison the wrong vial. But was it the wrong one? I had grabbed exactly what he had ordered. The error was his, not mine. Yet somehow, I felt responsible for not stopping it, for not questioning him in that critical moment. 3 days passed. I returned to work, and everything seemed normal on the surface. But I made it a point to check on the veteran's status. His name was Marcus Webb. He was 42 years old, married, father of 3 children, and his condition had deteriorated significantly. The kidney function tests showed severe damage, acute renal failure, the kind of damage that does not reverse itself easily, if at all. I mentioned this casually to Brenda, one of the senior nurses I had worked with for years. I trusted her. I just needed to talk to someone about what I had witnessed. Her face went pale when I told her. She grabbed my arm and pulled me into an empty room. She told me to be very careful about what I said and to whom I said it. She had seen this kind of thing before. Hospitals protect themselves first, she said. Always. The next day, I was called into a meeting, not with Mr. Douglas this time, but with 2 people from the legal department I had never met before. They sat across from me in a sterile conference room and slid a document across the table. It was a confidentiality agreement. They explained that due to the sensitive nature of Marcus Webb's case and the potential for litigation, all staff involved were required to sign this agreement. It prohibited me from discussing any details of the case with anyone outside the hospital, including family members of the patient, media, or legal representatives not affiliated with the hospital. I stared at the document. My hands felt cold. They gave me a pen and waited. I asked if I could take time to review it, maybe show it to a lawyer. The woman on the left smiled tightly and said that was certainly my right, but that refusing to sign could be interpreted as unwillingness to cooperate with hospital protocols, which could affect my employment status. I signed. I signed because I was scared, because I had student loans, because I had rent to pay. I signed, and I hated myself for it. Thank you for staying with me until now. This shows that you feel the same thing I felt when I lived through all of this. So go ahead and subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because what comes next changes everything. Marcus Webb's wife started showing up at the hospital. Her name was Jennifer, and she was a force of nature. She would wait in the corridors, near the ICU, watching everyone who came and went. She had questions. So many questions. Why had her husband's kidneys failed? What exactly had happened in the emergency room that night? Why were the doctors being vague about his prognosis? One afternoon, she caught me coming out of the supply room. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. She grabbed my hand and asked me directly if I had been there that night. I nodded. She asked me what happened. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to explain that her husband had received the wrong medication, that it had caused the kidney damage, that it could have been prevented, but the words would not come out. I told her I was sorry, that the doctors were doing everything they could. She looked at me with such desperate hope, and I looked away. After that encounter, things began to change. I noticed supervisors watching me more closely. My schedule was altered without explanation. Shifts I normally worked were reassigned. Colleagues who used to chat with me during breaks suddenly seemed busy, distant. Brenda stopped making eye contact. One evening, I found a note tucked into my locker. It was not signed. It simply said, "Some things are better left alone." My hands shook as I read it. I looked around the locker room, but it was empty. Someone was sending me a message. Someone wanted me to know I was being watched. I started having trouble sleeping. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, thinking about Marcus Webb lying in that ICU bed, his body failing because of a mistake that everyone was pretending had not happened. I thought about Jennifer and those 3 children. I thought about what kind of person I was becoming by staying silent. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this story from? Write it in the comments. It is incredible to see people from so many places following stories like this. I could not let it go. Something inside me refused to accept what was happening. So I started digging. I accessed the electronic medical record system during my break. I pulled up Marcus Webb's file and went through every entry from the night he arrived. I read the nursing notes, the physician orders, the medication administration records. And there it was, clear as day. The medication Dr. Harrison had ordered was correct in the initial verbal order, but when it was entered into the system, it had been changed. Someone had gone back and altered the record to make it appear that the correct medication had been given. I felt sick. This was not just about covering up an error anymore. This was falsification of medical records. This was illegal. I did more research. I looked into Dr. Harrison's background. What I found shocked me. He was married to Catherine Harrison, a senior executive at MedCorp, the corporation that owned our hospital and 15 others in the region. She sat on the board of directors. Dr. Harrison was not just any physician. He was protected by power and money. The next week, I received a formal written warning. It stated that I had been observed questioning established protocols, creating a negative work environment, and exhibiting behavior inconsistent with team collaboration. The warning went into my personnel file. It was a shot across the bow, a clear message. Stop asking questions or face consequences. I met with my supervisor to discuss the warning. She was a woman I had respected for years, someone who had mentored me when I first started, but now she sat across from me with a cold expression and told me that I needed to decide whether I wanted a future at this hospital. She said that sometimes we have to accept that we do not have all the information, that decisions are made above our pay grade for reasons we might not understand. She said that the best nurses know when to do their job and when to stay in their lane. I left that meeting feeling utterly alone. Everyone I had trusted, everyone I had worked alongside for years, had chosen the institution over the truth, and I was the only one who seemed to think that was wrong. Marcus Webb died on a Tuesday morning. I was not there when it happened. I was at home, my shift having ended hours earlier, but I got the notification on my phone. Patient deceased, cause of death, multi-organ failure secondary to acute renal injury. I sat on my couch and cried. I cried for Marcus, for Jennifer, for those 3 children who would grow up without their father. I cried because I knew the real cause of death, and it was not what would be written in the official report. The funeral was held 4 days later. I did not plan to go. It felt wrong, like I was intruding on their grief, but something pulled me there. I stood in the back of the church, watching as Jennifer and the children sat in the front row, surrounded by other military families and friends. The casket was draped with an American flag. Person after person stood up and talked about Marcus, his service in Iraq, his dedication to his family, his kindness, his strength. When the service ended, I tried to slip out quickly, but Jennifer saw me. She walked over, her face pale and drawn. She thanked me for coming. She said she knew I had cared for Marcus that night. She said she still had so many questions, but no one would give her real answers. She looked at me with those desperate eyes again and asked if there was anything at all. I could tell her that would help her understand why her husband was gone. I opened my mouth. The truth was right there, ready to come out, but fear gripped me. Fear of losing my license, fear of being sued, fear of destroying my entire career. I told her I was so sorry for her loss, and then I walked away. That night, I did not sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment over and over. I had failed Marcus, I had failed his family, and I had failed myself. myself. 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a subpoena. Jennifer had hired a lawyer and filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the hospital and Dr. Harrison. I was being called to give a deposition. I sat in my apartment holding that legal document, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment where I would have to make a choice. Tell the truth under oath and face retaliation, or lie and protect myself. I called someone I trusted, an older nurse named Gerald, who had retired 5 years earlier after working in hospitals for 30 years. I drove to his house and showed him the subpoena. He made coffee, and we sat at his kitchen table for hours while I told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he told me a story. He said that 20 years ago he had witnessed something similar. A surgeon had made a catastrophic error during a routine procedure, and a patient had died. Gerald had been pressured to alter his testimony. He had refused. He had told the truth, and the hospital had destroyed him. They had accused him of stealing narcotics, of having a substance abuse problem. They had forced him into a monitoring program, subjected him to random drug tests, made his life a living nightmare for 2 years until he finally could not take it anymore and quit. The surgeon? He kept his license and continued practicing. The hospital? They paid a settlement and moved on. Gerald told me that he did not regret telling the truth, but he wanted me to understand what I was walking into. He said the system protects itself, always, and people like us, we are expendable. I drove home that night feeling more confused than ever. Was the truth worth losing everything? Was it worth having my name dragged through the mud, my reputation destroyed, my ability to work as a nurse taken away? I did not know anymore. 2 days before my deposition, something unexpected happened. I was leaving the hospital after my shift when someone called my name. I turned around and saw Laura, another nurse who had been in the emergency room that night. We had barely spoken since Marcus's case. She looked around nervously, then asked if we could talk somewhere private. We went to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. She ordered tea but did not drink it. Her hands shook as she spoke. She told me that she had also seen what happened. She had been standing right there when Dr. Harrison administered the wrong medication. She had seen his face when he realized his mistake. She had heard Mr. Douglas talking to him afterward in the hallway, and she had watched as the medical records were altered. I asked her why she had not said anything. She started crying. She said she had 2 young kids, that she was a single mother, that she could not afford to lose her job. She said she had been living with the guilt every single day, and then she said something that changed everything. She said that if I was willing to testify truthfully, she would too, but she needed me to go first. She could not do it alone. I felt a surge of something I had not felt in weeks: hope. Maybe courage. 2 witnesses would be harder to discredit than one. Together, we could corroborate each other's accounts. Together, we might actually make a difference. We spent the next 2 days gathering everything we could. I printed copies of emails I had saved. Laura had photographs of the medication room from that night showing the inventory logs. We documented timeline details, everything we could remember. We knew the hospital would try to destroy us, but we also knew we had the truth on our side. The night before my deposition, I barely slept, but this time it was not from guilt or fear. It was from anticipation. I was finally going to do the right thing. I gave my deposition on a Thursday morning. I walked into that conference room, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. And then I did. I told them everything, every detail about that night, about the wrong medication, about Dr. Harrison's reaction, about being pressured to keep quiet, about the altered medical records. I spoke for nearly 3 hours. The hospital's lawyer tried to intimidate me, tried to poke holes in my story, tried to suggest I was mistaken or lying, but I held firm because I was telling the truth. The retaliation was swift and brutal. 2 days after my deposition, I was called into Human Resources. They informed me that I was being suspended immediately pending an investigation into alleged theft of controlled substances from the medication dispensary. They said that inventory discrepancies had been discovered and that I was the primary suspect. It was absurd. It was also devastating. Within hours, word had spread throughout the hospital. People I had worked with for years avoided eye contact. Some openly accused me. My locker was searched. My home was searched. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. But the damage was done. My reputation was destroyed. I contacted the state nursing board to defend myself. I hired a lawyer I could not afford. I fought the accusations with everything I had, but I was also falling apart. My partner of 4 years left me, saying he could not handle the stress and the public humiliation. My savings evaporated paying legal fees. I applied for jobs at other hospitals and was rejected immediately when they saw the suspension on my record. I was being made into an example, a warning to anyone else who might consider speaking up. The final hearing took place 6 months after Marcus Webb's death. I walked into that courtroom feeling like I was walking to my own execution. decision. But I had committed to seeing this through. Laura was there too. She had also been suspended from her job, also faced accusations, also lost nearly everything. But she had not backed down. The hospital's legal team was formidable. They had expert witnesses, character witnesses, mountains of paperwork. They painted Dr. Harrison as a dedicated physician who had done everything correctly under impossible circumstances. They painted me and Laura as disgruntled employees with axes to grind. But then it was my turn to testify. I took the stand, and once again told the truth. I walked through every moment of that night. I presented the documentation Laura and I had gathered. I explained how the medical records had been altered and why. I looked directly at Jennifer Webb, sitting in the gallery, and I told her exactly what had happened to her husband. Then Laura testified. She corroborated every single detail. The timeline matched perfectly. The facts were undeniable. The hospital's lawyer tried desperately to discredit us, but two nurses with identical accounts, with documentation, with nothing to gain and everything to lose, it was hard to dismiss. When I stepped down from that witness stand, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had finally done what I should have done from the beginning. I had told the truth. Whatever happened next, I could live with myself. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, they found the hospital and Dr. Harrison liable for medical negligence and wrongful death. They awarded Jennifer Webb and her children $3.2 million in damages. Dr. Harrison's medical license was suspended pending further investigation by the state medical board. The hospital faced additional penalties and mandatory review of their protocols, but my victory, if you could call it that, was hollow. I never worked at that hospital again. The theft charges against me were quietly dropped, but the stain on my reputation remained. Most hospitals in the Chicago area would not hire me. I was blacklisted. I struggled for months, working temporary jobs, questioning whether fighting for the truth had been worth it. Then I got a call from a veterans clinic on the south side. They had followed the case. They knew what I had done and why. They offered me a position. I have been working there for almost a year now. I make less money than I did before. My career trajectory will never be what it could have been. I lost relationships, financial stability, and years of my life to stress and legal battles. But when I look at myself in the mirror now, I can meet my own eyes. Jennifer Webb sent me a letter 3 months after the trial. She thanked me. She said that knowing the truth about what happened to Marcus, that having someone finally stand up and fight for him, had given her family some measure of peace. She said her children would grow up knowing their father's death had not been in vain, that someone had cared enough to risk everything for the truth. I keep that letter in my locker at work. On the hard days, when I wonder if it was worth it, I read it, and I know that it was. And this true story shows how much it can cost to do the right thing. Olivia lost her job. Her reputation was attacked. She faced threats and intense psychological pressure, all because she chose not to stay silent in the face of an error that cost a life. Now I want to know from you, what would you have done in her place? Would it be worth risking everything for the truth? Leave your opinion in the comments. I read them all and really want to know what you think about this. If you are enjoying these real stories of nurses who lived through impossible situations, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next cases. Every story here is based on real experiences that show the side no one sees of the profession. And go ahead and watch the next recommended video. I am sure you will be even more surprised.